Hello. So thank you for turning up for this session. This is the session T5S2, and this session is about simulation and games. I hope that's what you came for. And we have two really good case studies to look at this afternoon. And the question that we're asking is there a better way to learn than by doing? So the first speakers that we have are from Virgin Atlantic, and that's Tom Warburton and Zoe Randall. Tom works for Virgin Atlantic and is a consultant in learning technology and is responsible for implementing learning technology solutions and your learning management system. Correct, just checking. And Zoe is also a consultant at Virgin Atlantic, and she is a specialist in their passenger service system, which is going to be central to what they're going to tell you about today. So welcome to Tom and Zoe. Thank you.
Well, welcome to our session. We're here to tell you about a learning game that we created to help support the implementation of a new reservation system at Virgin Atlantic. Now, we're hoping this is going to be the most useful session for you at the conference, simply because what we're going to show you is a simple use of learning technology that you can apply to your next learning project. So as Julie said, I'm Tom Warburton, and I manage online learning and the LMS at Virgin. And I'm presenting with Zoe.
Hi, I'm Zoe Randall, and I am now a change manager for Virgin Atlantic, but was a training consultant through this project.
So first of all, put your hand up if you've got some kind of system implementation or massive business change project planned for the next few years. So quite a few of you there. So hopefully this will be particularly helpful for you, but if not, you can still apply it to any kind of learning project or even to recruitment, where often we see more and more games appearing. So in terms of what we're going to cover, we're going to tell you our project story. Then we're going to have a think about what we actually created, have a look at it, show you what it looks like, and try to explain the different aspects of how it was developed. And also we'll provide a little bit of technical information if that's what you're into. And then lastly, we're going to show you the results. So what impact did it actually have on the business, on the project, and what difference did it make? So, firstly, to begin, we're going to have a little think about what problem we were trying to solve. Well, a study was done in the 1970s by an American journal which was looking to find out the most efficient method of travel. And what they found was that a bike is the most efficient method. Now, bikes are designed to help you get to a place faster. And this is similar to the purpose of our learning game, as we wanted our learners to get up to speed as quickly as possible on how to use this new system that we were implementing. So the context is we had this huge system implementation where overnight we would switch off our old system, and then the next day employees would have to use and do their day jobs in this new system. So the problem we were trying to solve was, how can we help our employees not forget how this new system works, so when it goes live they know how to use it. Now, the problem we had was that employees were completing their classroom training up to 6 weeks in advance of the go-live date. So we needed to help people not forget what they needed to know on that day one. And as humans, we generally just forget things. So this project was really critical from a training point of view, as we needed to help people play with the system and get familiar with it in a sort of a customer scenario format, but also learn those key system tasks that they need to know on day one. Well, games are part of our culture now, and the key behaviour that games encourage is playfulness, which makes learning so much more fun. So, for example, if I had to learn a language, I would much rather use the Duolingo app than be given some kind of boring textbook. And our main issue was that we had no test site for people to use and play with, so the games provided a way for people to play and learn new skills. So we were changing our reservation system, which for an airline is a bit like doing heart surgery on the business whilst running a marathon with no finish line. And that's because a reservation system is almost the heart of everything an airline can do. So it's where all your airport systems will talk to it, your contact centres, your website, it all links to the reservation system. So it's essentially the most important system an airline can ever change. Now, the complication we have, and maybe you can relate to this, is that airlines don't sleep. There are always planes flying. So this project was really critical, as we didn't have the luxury of stopping the operation. So it was described as unplugging the heart very quickly, putting in a new one, whilst keeping the patient alive during the whole process. So we had to do everything feasible to minimise the risk of disruption at launch. So in essence, customers didn't notice anything had changed. And this means our training goal was to help learners identify how to use the system, but also how the system can be used to help improve their customer interactions. So the idea being that on day one, when that system went live, they knew exactly what to do. The operation could continue as if the change of system had never happened.
So Tom's talked a little bit about some of our challenges we had with this particular project. The first issue was that we had no system in front of us at the time when we had to start creating our game scenarios. So we had to work sometimes in quite a backward fashion to develop and validate gaming scenarios for the new system. We also needed to support our customer centres, our contact centres, through the cutover, because they would be operating as normal. And in fact, we had to increase with additional staff for the customer centre. And we also needed to support our frontline airport staff, who would still be checking passengers in and dispatching flights as one system was being turned off and another one brought in and stood up. So really quite a nerve-wracking experience for those people who were facing those customers at that time. We also needed to balance out our staff's behaviours with the system processes. We wanted this to be really seamless for our customers, basically. So our solution, we decided to use our budget for the game to support the airport staff and the contact centre staff with their games. There was 2 different applications that came off of the new system. The airport application was called Snap, and the customer centre application was called Access. So we had Snap to it for the airport guys, and we had Open for Access for the contact centre. So we had 2 different variations of the game, and we needed 5,000 people to be up to speed for the cutover. And so what we did was we created these 2 games using SMEs to help us work out our scenarios so they felt realistic for the end user. So, what was the objective of the game? So we've kind of said this already really, but we need people to be up to speed with the most common tasks they would be performing on that cutover night and going into the next few weeks. And we needed them to still maintain the excellent conversations we'd expect all of our people to have and maintain our brand expectations for the customer. What was really critically important for us is that no customer should notice we were doing this cutover. I'm sure you've all seen what happens when airlines get things wrong. Negative PR can be huge for airlines. So that was something we were very aware of.
Well, now I'm going to give you a demo of the actual game and give you a little bit of detail how it was made and what the components are. So firstly, to talk about how it was built. So after a big tender exercise, we selected our agency partner with Leo Learning. And part of the reason for selecting Leo was because as part of the LTG, or the Learning Technology Group, they're partnered with an organisation called Preloaded, which are a games development business. And because the game was a really essential part of this training package, we wanted to be partnered with someone who really knew and understood games. Well, Leo developed a package of learning, so we had some sort of very standard system training modules, which was sort of the core functional learning. We also had the 2 games, and we also had explainer animations, which we used to preview the games, and we'll show you one of those in a few moments. Well, the development was staggered over a year, and that's because we had a slight complication with this project, which maybe you can relate to, and that is the system we were actually developing the games for wasn't built. So almost our first conversation with Leo was, can we have a look at the system? And our answer was, well, it's not actually built yet. So it was, we had to sort of almost stagger it during the year, as and when the modules became available in the system. So the game was developed fully bespoke, and we had this decision at the start of the project as to whether we make the game a little bit more basic using software maybe like Storyline, which long-term gives you that ability to amend it in-house more easily, or whether we make the game more advanced by going fully bespoke, which gives us a few more technology-based options. But the trade-off there is that we won't be able to as easily amend it post-go-live. And the decision we made was to, in essence, make the game as good as it can be, as our ultimate goal was this focus of the transition as opposed to the long-term training need. So we decided to go fully bespoke as we wanted that learning to be as high quality as possible. Well, 1 year on, we're still using the airports game, but the contact center game is slightly less used just because the application that's demonstrated in the game has now been superseded by a slightly different version with different workflows. And it's worth noting that, of course, these games come at a price, but it's not as much as you might think. And it's nothing compared to the price of a bad system transition.
So Virgin Atlantic had never done a system cutover like this before. It was the first time in 30 years that we'd changed our main system, and we'd also never had a game before. So we wanted to build a lot of excitement for the end user. We wanted them to feel reassured that we were thinking really carefully about how we supported them through it. So it felt right to work with Leo to develop a little teaser trailer. And again, we had 2 trailers, one for the airport guys and one for the contact centres. So they felt like it was unique to them. And we're just going to show you the teaser trailer now.
At any time, from any place, this autumn, the time has come to answer the call.
Good afternoon, Virgin Atlantic. How may I help you?
Hi, yes, thanks. Could I please request a vegetarian meal on my flight?
Now it's down to you. These people have places to be, and they'll need your help.
We must clinch this deal. I need you in New York tonight.
Will you save their day? From Air 4 comes Open for Access, a new interactive game to support your Air 4 training. Answer the call. Prove your knowledge of the Access system in randomized scenarios. Be a star. Assist your customers efficiently and prove just how awesome you are. Create your own custom avatar. Challenge your colleagues and soar above the rest.
Hello? Yes, can I book a seat for my darling Barnaby on my flight, please?
Certainly. Is Barnaby your son? Will he require a child's meal?
I think he'd prefer a pedigree chum. He's my guide dog.
That's absolutely fine. Let me sort that for you now.
Available from September 2016 via Your Performance and Development, our learning management system. The game that will prepare you for the Access takeoff this November.
Good morning. Welcome to Virgin Atlantic. How may I help you?
Fly to new heights with Air 4.
You have to have a little bit of cheese sometimes with these things. So alongside the trailer, we also had posters around all of our different buildings to kind of just really keep putting it in people's attention that this was something that was available to them. We also spent a lot of time, not only with the Virgin Atlantic Board of Directors, but also with our senior vice presidents, explaining our approach that we were taking. They really loved the game concept and bought into it, and they offered us prizes like free flights, which you can imagine always goes down really well with people. So that really helped just add to the success of the game, because there was prizes involved as part of their play.
Well, we're now going to give you a little bit of detail about the game's design, just before we show you an actual video of the gameplay. Well, both of the games have the same interface design, that is on the actual game itself, but they just use different locations because there's different systems and they have different scenarios, because one's airports, one's contact center. Now, system implementations are generally quite boring, but your training doesn't have to be that way. And the blockbuster feature of this particular game is that it grades the answer based on how quickly you respond and how accurately you answer. Very similar to how the Kahoot online game works. So when the question appears, the stars will reduce, which you can see in the top right image, and you have to be really quick to get 3 stars. And also you can personalize on the bottom right image, you can personalize your actual game play figure and have a little avatar, which again just is a simple thing just to make it a little bit more engaging. Now, it's worth noting that we've never done a game before, but the audience really liked it, as it's just so different to the standard e-learning format. So we would definitely do it again if the same project came up. And people particularly like this sort of Kahoot idea of having to answer really quickly, as it meant people played it over and over again because they wanted to get their scores up, getting as many stars as possible, which massively improved engagement. Well, the game contains a different story for each round of scenarios, and then tasks are completed in the system for the customer's requests. And each task would involve responding to a behavioural question as well as completing a system process. And the user is then graded on how they respond to both of those elements. And the more elements you have, the more likely it is you'll have a variety of scores, a bit like Kahoot. And in our particular game, the scores were out of 1,000. So we deliberately tried to push Leo to get as many scenarios in and as much variety in the scoring just to make the leaderboard a bit more fun. There are also 5 levels which ramp up as you go through the game with more difficult scenarios, again making it more playable because you want to try and increase your score. And if you compare the game to a textbook, it's really hard with textbooks to put complex customer conversations in there and get real-time feedback. Whereas with the game, users can get branching scenarios and they're getting real-time feedback from customers and they're practicing how to use the system in one place, which is incredibly useful.
So we've referenced kind of our brand and our behaviours before, and an important leverage point for the game was the fact that not only could we enforce the repetition of the system processes, but we could use the added advantage of conversations and behaviours. So what we did with the game was each scenario that you play is based around a conversation, whether it's a passenger presenting themselves at a check-in desk or a customer centre conversation over the phone. So that's where the SMEs really helped us to use the right wording and make sure the scenario felt right to the end user. We didn't want them to feel like it wasn't designed by somebody who was an expert in those processes. So what we had was a conversation-based scenario. So you're in a scenario and you have a choice of wording. One of them will be on brand and one will be very slightly off. And the end user has the ability to select what they feel is the most appropriate answer for that question or that statement. And we weighted the scoring on the behavioural pieces as well. So not only were you scored on how good your process knowledge was, but also actually the quality of the conversation you were having with your customer. So what we'd like to do is just show you a demo of the game. I'm sure you're itching to see it a little bit more now. Hopefully you are. So we've got a little demo of the game being played. So here we have the end user setting up their avatar. We chose not to put any sounds on the games because the customer centre guys would often be able to play this at their desks in the customer centre environment, and we didn't want it to be an added distraction. And again, if you're in the airport in a breakout room, again, they just don't want the distraction of noise and music around. So here we're just selecting the avatar options. And we're put into the different levels. So you'll see the levels above are locked, only level 1 is open. You have to complete that level before you can move on. We wanted it to have that kind of Candy Crush feel. And this is the call centre game. So you're put into that scenario and you're made to feel like you're having a briefing at the beginning of your shift. You then answer a call. So each scenario starts with you picking up a call, and as soon as you answer that call, the metrics in the middle are what our call handlers would be used to. So we start the conversation, our customer gives us a scenario, and the end user is reading their different options that they have. So at this point, it's not necessarily about speed, but it's about good decisions. So once they've kick-started that conversation, we get the scenario. So this is level 1, so it's going to start with something fairly basic. And therefore, there's only kind of one option to continue the conversation. And then you're put into the system to start the process. So as soon as you kind of press start, then you're in there. We wanted an on-hold option because that's what you can do in the customer centre. If you don't know, you put somebody on hold, but you lose points if you do that because it's negative customer experience. So now you're in the Axis system, and it's how quickly you can complete this task. So we slowed this down a little bit just so I could talk over it, but you can see the stars coming and going at the bottom because of the speed of the user, and they've actually completed that task with 3 stars. So they finish the conversation, because obviously you have to finish the customer conversation, and then you're closing that call, and then you'd pick up the next one. So that's kind of one example of one scenario of the level 1 game. So we had a leaderboard. So scoring was really important. There was a lot of conversations around how to score, and Tom's the expert more on scoring than I am. But this is an example of our leaderboard in the customer centres. And we have 2 different sites. We have one in Crawley, one in Swansea. So there was inter-site competition, who could get the highest points. We had airports versus airports. And the Vice President of Airports got caught on his mobile phone playing it in a couple of meetings, because he's quite competitive and he thought he could win. But we made sure he didn't. So, so here we have kind of an example. And if you remember, I don't know if Tom said or not, but the game was out of 1,000. And these people are scoring in the 700, so that's indicative of lots of repetition of play. You couldn't have got that just from one play.
Well, we're now going to just talk through, lastly, the results. So first of all, what was the take-up? Well, we believe the solution worked, as the business really widely embraced the gaming approach to learning. And that was demonstrated by these exceptionally high numbers of times people both access the game to improve their scores, and also the amount of times they repeated going into it. So Snap to It is our airports game. As you can see, it was played by a lot of people with an average of 5 per person. And Open for Access, our contact centre game, again, played by an average of 8 times per person, which is a really good result. Now, these repeated attempts may have been motivated by the prize of free flights. Obviously, it's a lot easier when you work for an airline to give away free flights, but that was the prize for getting the highest score. Now, one interesting thing to note is that in terms of classroom usage, where the game was first introduced to delegates, we had feedback from the trainers that the Gen X and baby boomers wanted to just almost play it once, whereas the Gen Y upwards sort of generations wanted to keep playing the game over and over. And this could be because they were much more used to online games, be it on their phones or maybe when they were at school. So as a small business case tip, if you study the end-user demographic for your next project and find they're predominantly millennials, you might want to consider learning games, as this generation almost expects games and gravitates more towards them than formal, structured e-learning. Well, what was the reaction? Well, through our surveys, we believe it resulted in learning that was applicable back in the workplace. And also, lots of people like the pace of the game and the different levels. And I think part of the success for that in our development process was to do lots of iterations, consulting with the business. So it wasn't just L&D and the training teams for the project going, yeah, we think this is the right game solution, we're just going to drop it on people. It was almost at every stage, working with the business, working with just delegates in those particular areas. Do you like the game? Do you like these scenarios? Does it work for you? And so through lots of prototyping and checking each iteration with the business, with the different scenarios, that feedback helped us to get a really high success rate of implementing it within the business.
So, when Northwest, American airline, did a very similar cutover, their customer centre staff went through a 10-day classroom training event. At Virgin Atlantic, we had a blended approach, so we did have classroom training. We also had the digital learning that Tom's referenced, and we had the game. And through that blended approach, what I would say to you is all of our call handlers had a 5-day training event. So you could say, comparison to Northwest, we cut the actual classroom time in half because we had the other resources, including the game, to support it. So, hands up if you remember Virgin Atlantic changing its airline systems last year. So that kind of, for me, is the success of the game. On the 13th of November last year, which was my husband's 40th birthday, he's never forgiven me, we spent the night awake cutting over airline systems. And yeah, there was a few little things on the day, but there wasn't passengers, queuing out of airport terminals. We'd reduced our flying programme to help minimise any disruption, but actually all of our end users did a fantastic job on the day, and that's where the game kind of proved its value for us. And the last word here is from our executive sponsor, who's our Senior Vice President of IT. He loved the game concept, he was into it from the beginning, and he championed it for us and really made sure that everybody knew about it and was part of the PR exercise, basically.
Well, that concludes our presentation, and our emails are on screen. You can also find us on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. We're welcome to share with you stuff after the presentation today, or even if you want to contact us to connect in some way, then that's all fine as well. Thanks.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Tom and Zoe straight away? Yeah.
Hi. I appreciate that you had around 1 year to develop it, but if you got something like us, you have to do it in like four weeks. How do you come up with something like that?
In reality, even though we were working on it for a year, I'd say most of the bulk of work happened from the August. And we had to have this live in August, so I think June and July were a blur, because we had to wait till the system was in, it was semi-validated, and then we could start finalising. So we kind of had to work in iterations, if you like. We kind of thought, right, we want these scenarios, we'll pad them out, we'll have the system a bit later. So we had a kind of a year run-up, but what we could do in like the first 6 months of that was very, very little.
And just to add to that, what we did in the time before we had the system available is we actually worked out what the framework was for the game. So you do all the design work and you almost just leave the screens as blanks, and you just drop those in at the last minute when you've got the system available.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to ask a question? Lady here.
Hiya. What software did Leo use to create the game?
Yes, so it was done in Leo's bespoke software called Morpheus. So it's not like a storyline authoring tool that's available commercially. But if you speak to Leo downstairs, they'll tell you all about it.
Just for sort of argument's sake, a lot of the functionality in that you could create in a storyline. I know that it's obviously more advanced, but there are some of the... Yeah,
it's a good point. There are more things you can do in a storyline now. So it's worth noting that when we built the game and had to decide on the software, it was mid-2015. So storyline was slightly less advanced back then as to what it is now. But there's still things you can't do in storyline that we could do in this in Morpheus. So.
Hi there. The example you used, it looks like a fantastic way to upskill a population on a new piece of software. What did you do with regards to ongoing performance support, and how did that tie in?
So in terms of ongoing sort of performance or training, so we can maybe comment on what is done as BAU now. But in terms of the resources, they're still available. And what we plan to do is, because the software actually evolves, which makes the learning outdated quite quickly, is we're going to possibly change the way that we structure new learning. So rather than just sort of keep maintaining the old e-learning, we'll try to just do it in a new way, just accept the fact that that was for that period of time. Now software's moved on, and then we'll do something different.
And we're lucky that the airport game still has a lot of validity and is used. The customer centre application has already evolved in the first year. There's been updates and new releases that have enhanced it. So you could still play a lot of those level 1 scenarios for the customer centre and they'd be valid. But like Tom said, the cost to maintain it was paid for that purpose and it served that purpose. So we almost wrote that cost off at that point. The fact that the airport one still works is a bonus, basically.
Any other questions? Yep.
It's good for you. You're welcome. It's good for me as well, but I don't do it. I noticed from your scoring that the top scorers were scoring in the 700s. Been interested to have seen a graph that showed how far that dipped down across the group of people. But 700s after multiple attempts, 55 attempts, would suggest out of 1,000, would suggest you've still got a 25% skill gap somewhere. What have you done to close that?
So there are 2 points on that. Sorry, you might have one. The first point is that the game was actually, it's a good question, there's a bit more detail to that. So the game was structured based on the levels for the scoring. So there were 5 levels, and for example, for level 1, the max score you could get was 200. So the max score you could get for level 4 would have been 800. So possibly that leaderboard was taken from a level 4 section, because we actually built the levels for the games as the project went on. So we didn't have all 5 levels from day 1, so you couldn't get 1,000. The max you could get on day 1 was 200. So later on, though, as the game evolved, that's why people went back into it, because they could then suddenly get their scores up.
So we asked all the team leaders to work with their team members as well. So everybody had their classroom training, everybody was able to use the digital learning that we created, and that was kind of a simulation-based digital learning, which again was a new thing for Virgin Atlantic. Why not do it all at once? And then we had the game. So what we kind of asked the team leaders to do was really work with the individuals in their teams, speak to them about where their confidence level was, because like Tom said, the game wasn't actually for everyone. Not everyone enjoyed that way of learning. And so what we did also do is we went back and we had to do some one-on-one training events for people that were maybe the slower learner or just needed a bit more one-on-one time. So what I would say is the majority of our customer centre went through a 5-day induction course in the classroom. Some others would have had bespoke bits tagged onto that with the trainer. And it was really important to us that everyone felt they'd had what they needed. I haven't got with me how many hours we spent individually with people, I'm afraid. But yeah, we kind of made sure it was bespoke for individuals.
I think you might have just answered my question, actually, but I was going to ask about, given part of the scoring was around speed, and I'm just imagining people who find it quite difficult to read that fast would find it difficult to score highly, so would that be quite demotivating? But if you add other points, other support, then maybe that would mitigate that.
And it took a lot of tweaking. You know, the first iteration of the game was Snap, and the scoring was set way too fast. We were like, we can't read the question as quick as, you know, you're losing points. So that's something that we just had to work with Leo on and just make sure it felt right. And yeah, it might have put some people off. I think definitely the older generations were a little bit more put off by that. But then people do like to kind of do well and exceed. So I think, like Tom said, the younger people definitely wanted to go back in it and play it. But we kind of always knew that some people in our demographics just wouldn't be as interested in it, which is fine. It served the purpose for the majority.
All right, if you've got further questions later on, we will open it up to the whole panel after our next speakers have presented their case study. So for the moment, thank you very much to Tom and to Zoe for their presentation. Just while we're sorting out technology and swapping over microphones, I'd like to introduce you to Lynsie Chu and Alan Parkinson from University College London. And I'll just tell you about them. So Lynsie is a senior teaching fellow at the University College London School of Management, and Lynsie is also the programme director of the MSc in Professional Accounting. She provides the academic direction for the school's pivotal role as in a venture between the ACCA, which is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, and the University of London. Alan Parkinson is the Deputy Director of Education at the University College London School of Management, and Alan is a qualified accountant. He does admit to that. Yep.
Colleagues in the room who are also admitting to it as well.
Okay. And a professor in managerial accounting at the École de Paris. He specialises in management accounting and financial management, and also generic accounting modules. So just while we're finishing off, getting everybody sorted out, I hope you will enjoy this next case study, as long as everything is working. So, Lynsie, when you're ready, I'll turn this one off and leave it to you.
Okay, afternoon, everybody. Quite nicely, I think we're dovetailing with the Virgin Atlantic simulation in the fact that for our simulation that we provided for our online MSc program, we used an airport simulation as well. Not quite in the same fashion, but we were looking at more from the strategic how to manage an airport in that sort of real world context. So myself and Alan will give you an overview of the program. We'll also give you some information in terms of the type of learners that we had on our MSc program, and also some of the challenges, but also a bit of the fun that we embarked upon on our journey. And I see a very familiar face staring right at me at the moment, and his handsome face will pop up on screen as well. Peter from Unicorn is here, and he helped to provide the solution for this.
It's when she said handsome Peter, I couldn't quite, yeah. It's drugs, bane of society.
Or you can pay me later, Peter. Okay, so this is us, and this is pretty much the core team of who put this simulation together. So there's myself, Lynsie, Alan, Peter Phillips from Unicorn, and then Rob Hubbard from LAS as well. So the two chaps here on the end, they help to provide the actual learning technology side of the solution, whereas myself and Alan worked more on the pedagogical side of things. Okay, I'm going to show you a video. Fingers crossed it's going to work. I had a bit of a nightmare last night, and my Microsoft Surface didn't like me at all and didn't want to play. So this is a brand new one which Work provided. So fingers crossed it's going to work. Maybe not. How do I play? No? Okay. Good stuff. I can... Hold on one second.
And of course,
apologies.
At 11 o'clock this morning it worked. In the office.
I think we all understand what it's like when technology doesn't work. They're all sympathetic.
Do you know what it is? It's... The MSc in Professional Accountancy is the first master's of its kind and is the result of a partnership between two renowned institutions, the University of London and ACCA. The programme provides you with the opportunity to study for two prestigious and globally recognised qualifications at the same time. This allows you to save time and money as you are effectively gaining the two qualifications at once.
We're delighted to be the first professional accountancy body to be able to deliver this type of programme. Providing global access to a prestigious master's qualification as part of ACCA's professional qualification will offer our students and members the opportunity to enhance their employability even further.
So that's just a quick snapshot of a promo video that we launched a couple of years ago. So if I give you an actual overview of the programme itself, so this is an MSc, it's a master's programme, master's level course that is predominantly online based. So all of our learners are around the world. They are qualified accountants. There aren't any accountants in the room today, are there? No, none that would admit.
If you want to admit it, yeah.
Admit. So that's our major target audience for this particular programme. And we entered into a strategic partnership with the University of London, International Programmes, UCL, and also ACCA. So in terms of the project and the lead time to it, I think it took probably about 3 years sort of lead up to main contractual negotiations happening and things like that. So as Alan Hatfield from the ACCA said, it is very much the very first type of master's programme of its kind. So we were very excited as being part of that project and being part of that team. In terms of how we then chose Unicorn to go with it, Alan, would you like to probably pitch in at this point to give a bit of story?
Suffice to say that a number of years ago, we won't go back as far as the actual year, I'd done some work with Unicorn before, and the thing is it seemed to work. That was good. But the other thing is, although we spoke to other people, so it wasn't just, oh, we'll go to somebody we know, there was an understanding. And I think particularly when you get into a learning project, particularly where technology is involved, and as some of you I'm sure will appreciate, sometimes tensions can start to run a little bit high when you get differences of opinion or things are going wrong. So the fact that I'd actually worked with Unicorn in the past, and those things had happened, and we'd managed to come through the other side, I think there wasn't that learning curve that you then need. So there was a familiarity which we were able to use as a base to build upon.
So a little bit about our learners. So I've mentioned that it is a master's degree. So already there is that innate assumption that the learners are financially literate. So I have to say that there are two main routes onto the master's programme. One where you're still studying ACCA, so you're still part qualified, nearly at the end, or you're already qualified and you're using this as a stone to actually gaining an MSc qualification. So there is that assumption that they are financially literate and are experienced either in the workplace or very soon coming into the workplace as part qualified or qualified
and the vast majority of students are actually qualified accountants in the workplace. Some of them in actually quite senior positions, being able to get prior recognition credit for their ACCA qualification.
In terms of where they are based in the world, so I mentioned earlier on that they literally do come from every corner of the globe. And for us, I think that was, again, one of the most exciting parts of this. We work in a face-to-face institution at UCL, very traditional in that sense. So we are used to having a very diverse cohort, but being online made it even more exciting because of the way in which we could tap into other parts of the world that couldn't come to study in England, in London, but wanted to further their professional and personal development. So we have many students from New Zealand, Australia, Southeast Asia, the African continent, also in the Caribbean, and I think Alan's quite keen on the Caribbean, probably.
Yes, there might be a visit. I'm available. Yeah.
And also North America. So we quite literally do cover most of the globe in that sense. So our learners are very diverse in terms of their educational background, from where they come from. They are accountants, but they are very much looking to further their own professional and personal development. So we've got a nice global catchment. A bit about the actual reason as to why we chose to go with a simulation, a game. I'll hand you to Professor Parkinson, who loves all this stuff about pedagogical
Yeah, I'm quite sad as well as being an accountant. Let me start with the second bullet point, if I may. I mean, student engagement. Whether it's face-to-face or online, what we know is if you don't engage the students, the technical term is you're stuffed right from the outset. So there's that challenge. A number of years ago, I used to work for the Open University Business School, distance and open learning, and the perennial challenge was, how do you engage those students who are at a distance? I mean, what do we talk about? We talk about the loneliness of the long-distance learner, you know, that they don't necessarily see each other. We have all these forums, of course, and I don't know, I saw some figures towards the end of last year where on a typical online program, somebody had done a survey, between 10 and 20% of students might contribute regularly to a forum. So again, that means you've got 80 to 90% potentially maintaining their loneliness of the long-distance learner. So I think student engagement, how do we engage students, bring them together? Of course, passive to active learning. It would have been really easy just to put up conventional lectures. We stand there and we tell them what you're going to do, and they do some exercise afterwards. So actually bringing it to life through active learning. And that's where this idea of constructivism came through as a learning theory, where trying to encourage students to have a connection between, an interconnection between, and consequently an interaction between what they already know, their experiences, their beliefs, and then connecting that with new ideas, trying to bring them together to make sense of that. Now, we won't go into the learning theory as such, but if you talk about psychological constructivism, people changing the way in which they make sense of things, gaining new knowledge, making sense and meaning. But there's another branch which is social constructivism. And here what we thought was, again, go back to the loneliness of the long-distance learner, how can we actually bring people together? And we felt that the simulation might be a way of doing this. So, and Lynsie will be saying more about it shortly, but just to give you a brief intro, so what happens is the students, based on time zones, so that they're not connecting with each other out of time zones, are put together in teams of 5, and each week is a year. This simulation runs for 5 weeks within the program, and they each take a role. Somebody will be chief executive 1 week, somebody will be the chief finance officer, someone will be the chief technical officer, and so on. And then they have to swap roles each week. They're tasked with decisions about running the airport, not just the day-to-day stuff, but strategic decisions. Should we take the money, which we might have to borrow, so there's all that stuff about the debt interest and all the rest of it, and invest in new car parking facilities? But of course, if they do that, they can't invest in other things? Should they have more concession space for shops? Are they going to focus on low-cost budget stuff? Are they going to go for the more seasoned business traveller and maybe business class, in which case they might want luxurious lounges? But it's about thinking about and articulating their strategies, then going through with their decisions about what they're going to do and making a forecast. They then put that into they keep minutes of their debates, by the way, and some of those debates we see what goes on, they can be quite fiery, and some people get very, very upset with each other, but they have to come to a conclusion by the end of a particular time at the end of each week for a year. They go into a system. The system then says, okay, this is what your balance sheet, your profit and loss account, so we've set them key performance indicator targets, which they have to try and hit. And then what they don't realize initially is we then press a real world button where we've got a simulated real world model. And out comes, of course, well, we were going to be the most profitable airport the world has ever seen. We were going to be the most cash-rich airport the world has ever seen. We were going to have the most highly satisfied customers the world has ever seen. Our staff are going to be so highly motivated. And then, of course, when it comes out, they find that they've made the biggest loss the world has ever seen, that they've exceeded their overdraft. And then, as we would do as managers, when we look at here's our budget, here's the actual, there's a difference, we have to try and make sense of what's gone on in the world. So in that sense, this idea of bringing people together, active learning from each other, trying to make sense of the meaning, we thought it would. We trialled it and it seemed to work, and Lynsie will say more about that later on. And I think, go back to this loneliness of the long-distance learner, I think the community sharing, that's something that the students keep coming back to us and saying, we didn't think it would be like this, it's actually just been really good, really good. Lynsie.
So, the solution. So Peter and his team at Unicorn came to us and said, we can create a realistic business simulation model, a sophisticated Excel model based on an algorithm, based on real-world data of a particular airport and other airports amalgamated, to produce a dashboard which each team, Alan mentioned just now, to be able to play and forecast for the next 5 years. So they'll be able to actually read off all of the financial data that's being output, make their decisions, see what's actually happening according to those forecasts, and tweak as necessary. Along the way, Alan mentioned that they record the minutes of their meetings. They also have to actually provide the rationale for the strategic choices that they've chosen to take. So they actually have to do real-world research to be able to corroborate some of the assumptions that they're making and actually put that into the model and hopefully produce a dashboard that looks fantastic so that they can feed into a nice leaderboard at the end of the financial period.
And it might be worth mentioning that just to, again, to bring it to life. Let's say, for argument's sake, you have, let's pick a number, 150 teams. How many are actually going to be doing it this time round, Lynsie?
This time, should be about 130.
About 130 teams this time round, 5 in each, where having set the targets for, we give them certain return on equity, return on capital employed, we give them performance, other non-financial targets, it goes into a leaderboard, which gets published. That starts to make it really competitive. And again, I think in a conventional online program, in many that I've seen, you tend not to get that, and the students really buy into that, and they're desperate to get to the top of the table. I'll give you an interesting point that we put to them though. What's the difference? Is one better than the other? A team that starts at, say, number 10 in week 1, goes to number 8, goes to number 7, and perhaps by the end of the 5 weeks has reached number 5. Is there much difference in terms of the learning knowledge and the making sense of the meaning between that team and a team that starts, say, 130 teams, starts at 130, goes to 115, gets up to number 83, gets up to number 52, and perhaps then gets into the top 30. And when we put that to them, that's quite interesting because it makes them realize that it's the incremental learning that becomes important for those particular types of students.
And that sort of iterative process of learning across the 5-week period actually then feeds into the very last assessment that they do for this module, where they have to engage with a chosen case study that we provide them. There's a small selection of between sort of 2 and 4 in specific industries. They get a model to play around with, to do forecasts with, and they have to produce a 5-year business plan based upon what they've learned from Icarus to be able to forecast into the future and provide strategic solutions for these case studies. So I'm going to show you a few screen grabs from the virtual interactive map that we also had as part of this. So again, these students are at a distance, so they have to have something imaginative to try and capture them and capture their attention for the next 5 weeks. So we have this airport interactive map where they can actually go through the airport and click on various different people, various different passengers, either at the bar or maybe sitting more locally, go through the security section of that airport, and they get to interact with them. So they would click on a particular passenger, and that passenger would tell them their gripes, their story, their issues with their current waiting time or other issues that are important to them. And that feeds into, again, those strategic choices that their teams are going to be making and changing across the 5-week period. There are also decisions to be made about short-term and long-term car parks, which I'm sure we're all fairly familiar with, but also about the runway, a new runway versus opening up another terminal and the initial outlay that would actually cost and the strategic implications of that.
But with the new runway, we didn't base it on Heathrow, I hasten to add. Yeah.
And also talking to the chief engineer and other various different stakeholders who are very important as part of the research to this. So that was to sort of get them thinking about an airport. And one of the main reasons why we chose an airport was because, to a lesser or greater degree, most of us have either been to an airport, used an airport, or can't stand the sight of an airport. So one way or another, there was that familiarity as a user, if not, we're also introducing this whole idea of thinking strategically for an airport too. And now I'm going to try and show you a quick demo of the simulation itself. So in terms of what the students receive, they all get to download the Excel model itself, and the front screen looks a bit like this. So they're able to kind of walk through the actual simulation or the model with various different help points. So there's a lot of information within the Excel file itself. This is the main sort of dashboard that the students would see, providing them with the financial summaries across the next few years. They're also able to see the key performance indicators, as well as choose various different reports that will provide them summary information, key highlights for them to help inform their decisions thereafter. In terms of what we used as an Excel model, I mean, in terms of financial data, there is a lot. So going for something more graphic-based, etc., probably isn't the best way to read off this kind of information to make decisions on. In the workplace context, where a lot of the companies that we've worked with, they use Excel or another version so that they're able to deal with financial data. So we thought in the first instance that using Excel isn't a bad choice. We're able to make it macro-enabled so that we can make it more interactive and produce something that looks a bit like this. Not only do they get to look at the financial data, but they also get to look at a slightly less glamorous version of the previous screenshots, but nonetheless an airport map that they can interact with as well. So they'll be clicking on various different parts, like the lounge, like the different concessions, like the runways, and a little pop-up will actually ask them to make strategic choices based upon, in this case, the runway maintenance costs. So they're able to compare with what happened last year, with what they're wanting to put forward for the coming years, and thinking about the implications for the next 3, 4, and 5 years, and what their financials are going to look like thereafter. This goes on for a little bit, so I probably won't show you all of it, but they're the main sort of highlights for it. You can also change the prices according to the runway charges and according to a bit of market research and economic research and the likely impact over the next 5 years as well. And so this is all trying to make the students appreciate, and a lot of them actually do this at work. So in that sense, it's not completely unfamiliar territory for them, but to place it in a context like this, in an educational context, to see it coming to life so that they can then take the learning from this and apply it to their final case study for their project at the end of the module, I think has worked fairly well for our students. So Alan, there's luxury concessions, and you can see the numbers sort of changing as we go
but I'm the one who doesn't get to go business class, so you would know about luxury concessions.
I don't know, Alan. I think business class has your name plastered all over it. Anyway, so I will move on from this one if I can. Okay. So in terms of the student registrations, so we actually launched officially in January 2016. So our program went live on the 10th of January 2016, and it was all hands on deck, and we had to welcome our online learners to the environment that we had for them. So the initial intake was very modest, quite small, and then online, came in July 2016, the second cohort that we welcomed, and you can see that that particular cohort was actually the larger surge of students who are actually qualified accountants, and they wanted a piece of the action, and they joined us to be part of the initial cohort. So on a rolling basis, the students take one module for a duration of 22 weeks, so 6 months. And it's each registration doesn't necessarily have to mean just one student. So one student can actually register for more than one module, which is why you actually see quite a large jump in the student registration numbers. So to date, in January this year, on the 8th of January, we welcomed another cohort, and cumulatively we have about just over 1,600 student registrations across all of our modules, including the module that we use the Icarus simulation on. Alan, anything to add about the student registrations?
No, except the one thing I guess that worries us is that this is still early days with the ACCA. We're just started year 2. ACCA, when we have our regular steering group meetings, they continually point out to us that they have a pool of 400,000 potential students. So we can just about manage with the 1,600. If all of a sudden people decide, oh, we think we'd like a slice of the action there, that could be interesting. But good to be a victim of success if it does happen. Yeah.
More trips to the Caribbean, Alan.
Well, I'm more than happy to inspire and motivate students from the Caribbean to join.
So quick stats. I have to say that the simulation itself isn't a formal requirement. So the module that they embark upon asks them to, for the first 11 weeks, have a go at research methodology, so a bit of the academic stuff thrown in. And then we ask them to participate in the simulation for the next 5 weeks, and then they have another 4 weeks to actually get to grips with producing their project itself. So the participation rate for the Icarus simulation was well beyond what we thought we would achieve. We managed to grab a 95% or so participation rate, and 90% of those students who were playing the simulation at the time actually completed the 5 weeks in full gusto and enthusiasm. So that for us actually was a quick win. We weren't sure about how much uptake there would be because it is a distance-based program, so this was one of our ways in which we were trying to engage with our audience. Pass rates for the module itself as well, we were very pleased with a sort of an 89% or so, and that figure actually has been updated since I gave you the slides, because we had another exam board
last week, yeah.
We confirmed a few more passes for the program itself. So fairly pleased. I think University of London, as well as a provider of distance education, are very pleased with the results of this particular program as well. A bit of student feedback as well. So we surveyed our students. So we asked for how they're going in terms of midway progress from their perspective. But we also asked them about the simulation specifically. So a few of them kindly allowed us to use a few quotes for them, which I think sort of self-explanatory there. I quite like this Icarus with this exciting, challenging, realistic and thought-provoking activity for that 5-week duration.
I think, Lynsie, some of you might be able to see it. It says on the first one, and most especially time management, which I found very difficult as a new parent. Let's not forget that the vast, vast majority of these students are qualified accountants. The vast, vast majority are working. Very many will have family responsibilities. These, by the way, the 22 weeks, they're double-weighted modules, so they're not a single-weighted module. So time management becomes important. And I guess it also says something about their character. Somebody with a busy, demanding life, maybe with a demanding family life, just trying to fit all of this in within that 22 weeks and staying on top of things. I think it actually says a lot about them as people, as individuals as well. And already we've had some feedback from some employers where they've been commenting, the students have been passing the feedback on to us, where they've been commenting on how well they think their managers, their accountants have done through actually responding to it's a heavy workload to the challenge that we put in front of them, and they've responded really, really well. I think it speaks volumes for them as people.
Actually, as one of a new parent, so we had. Are you
going to tell us something here, Lynsie, that we don't know?
Oh no.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Alan. Threw me completely. New parents. So at one of our graduation ceremonies very recently in November, we welcomed officially our first set of graduates, and we have 3. What we call we term the program MPAC, so that's our sort of nickname for it. And we have 3 MPAC babies that were conceived. I don't know when they were conceived, but they were.
No more detail needed, Lynsie. I said.
They were pregnant during the course of study, and actually they brought the baby along to graduation as well. So that was a nice sort of touch. So it did sort of prove to the other students who were also graduating, but also prospective students, that it is possible. So with the demands of a job, a career, but also life balance, and on top of that, education, we've got some really nice success stories too. Just a few more quotes as well, so you can see on screen. So I'll change those up as well. Alan, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, we've got about 1 minute left, so perhaps after this I can make that other point you said, you told me I should make.
Yeah, I think that's probably self-explanatory. So the future. So Icarus, as its current form, as an Excel, an all singing, all dancing Excel, macro-enabled Excel, is being transformed into an application. So that our students can actually play on their iPads, tablets, probably not their mobile phones unless their mobile phones are quite large, but to be able to see all of the financial data still, we sort of recommend either still continue using a laptop or indeed move over to a tablet. So it's making it even more portable than it currently is, and allowing further accessibility to our students worldwide.
Okay, and one very final point is, Lynsie mentioned about success. It was really pleasing back in November at the UK National, the Learning Technologies National Awards, that this actually got Best Simulation Award, so we're really pleased about that. Peter and Rob, our other colleague who was there as well, we were of course highly delighted that. We were even more delighted because Lynsie was out of the country, so we didn't have to share the champagne. So that was, because there would been none left, but yeah.
So here are just some of a few details for you if you want to contact us, but Peter is also sitting in the audience today as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So would anybody like to ask a question about this project? Any questions to start us off? Thank you.
Dare I say we have somebody who wants to take off first? Oh, no, okay. Terrible, isn't it?
I just had a question around, you had that slide about the participation, completion, and the pass rate. Did you find that there was an improvement from other MSc programs that you've done. So was this a new MSc program altogether, or was it something that you developed?
It's brand new as an online one.
Right,
so we had nothing to.
So there wasn't one that was
anecdotally about, but
right. Okay, never mind.
There is some evidence from some of the US online programs, particularly in accountancy and accounting and finance, where, I pick my words very carefully here, all universities are wonderful. The more wonderful universities tend to get, I think, high completion rates and high pass rates in the US versions of online programs. Some of them, however, you get lots of, the student retention can be a challenge. Yeah.
Anyone else have a question? This one? Yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, how did the teams, the people in the 5 in the group, how did they communicate when they were doing the simulation?
So we provided formal communication methods for them. So they were able to use the forums within the virtual learning environment. So that was their first port of call. But actually, naturally, they progressed into using WhatsApp and WeChat if they were in China areas, or email. So they were exchanging their personal details so that they could have real-time, quick responses. And actually, in our app version, we've built in a chat facility for them to actually communicate again in real time, but somewhere a bit more formal rather than a WhatsApp group. But yeah, WhatsApp, email, some of them even met each other because they were in similar time zones. They almost, some of them might have treated it a little bit like an online dating agency. So they were saying, oh, I just live down the road from you, let's meet up for coffee. So some of them created small library groups so that they could get together and discuss the sim itself.
Whether the new babies were anything to do with that particular aspect, Lynsie, I don't know if we should comment. But
any other questions from the floor? Chase.
It's more of an observation, really. Due to his problematic track history with flight, why did you choose Icarus as a name?
For that same ironic reason. Okay. I can't remember. Peter, how did Icarus, the name, come about? I can't remember what we...
We have just accepted it with crashing bird, didn't we? I just said we expected it to crash and burn, so it just seemed like that.
Can I ask you a question? Would you do this again? Would you do this on another course now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why?
I think part of it is proof in the pudding. So the feedback that we've had from the students and getting them engaged has worked. I think that the learning that they've taken from the activity itself, they have directly transferred it to the task that we set them, which is why our pass rates for the module are quite good. And I think especially with an online program, if you don't have something that's going to hook them in to really engage, then I think we're going to struggle with completion rates anyway. So University of London have had historically some issues with retention, with pass rates, and I think the MSc is one of those success stories that has provided them with the reason to go for this.
And I think where Lynsie says, because it works, I think that, but we could probably do it, in inverted commas, even better, because once you've seen the things that you could have done in a different way, to have another go would be useful. The other thing, I think two other things. One is, as individuals and people and colleagues working in the team, if you're involved in something that's almost exciting, that you're interested in, and you feel is adding some sort of value somewhere in the system, I think that's worthwhile doing as well. And if I just I mentioned about the Open University Business School 1,000 years ago when I was MBA program director and we launched the MBA then, I just wish we'd had something like this, because it would just been a different world. Mind you, I don't think computers were invented then.
Okay, so I'd like to open it up now for more questions for Tom and Zoe, if you wish to, or more questions for our friends from UCL. So has anybody got any questions for either of the presenters' groups left? No? Okay. Well, I think that's been a fantastic session. I think looking at two very extreme differences in terms of games and simulations, but also our common theme of flight and airports. So thank you very much to Tom and Zoe.